Hello, welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I'm joined as always by my man Mike Luciano. Mike, it feels weird. I don't know about you. It feels weird doing one of these a week. Like I'm so used to doing multiple a week from the season that it feels like it's been so long since we've gotten to sit down and talk about the Jets. But we're back. How are you feeling today, Mike? What's going on?
Well, it's been kind of a wild and crazy day behind the scenes here at Luciano HQ here, but I will put all that to the side a little bit and let's talk some Jets content and some draft content, which we haven't done in a really long time. We're going to get into some of the Senior Bowl guys, some of the quarterbacks, which I'm still seeing that sentiment around Jets Twitter. I don't know how, but we'll get into it, but we will. And at the end, we're going to get some bold predictions about what's going to look like in the offseason, what the regular season could look like. The possibilities are limitless. A world of pure imagination, like Willy Wonka, right?
Sure. Yep.
Go watch the Gene Hackman one. It's good. Yeah, you guys should have watched that by now. Before we get into anything, Willy Wonka related or not, I have a message for you guys from our friends over at DraftKings. Because with DraftKings offering a fantastic sign-up bonus this postseason, you could place a $5 bet on anything to instantly claim $150 in bonus bets, and you'll also be rewarded with a separate no-sweat single-game parlay every single day when you opt in. The best part is you will receive both rewards even if the first bet loses, guys. So when you join DraftKings, make sure to sign up with our code FSBETS. That is FSBETS. Using the code not only gives you the bonuses, but it directly supports the podcast, and if that's how you choose to show your support, we are very thankful for that. So use the code FSBETS if you've been considering signing up for DraftKings to maximize your first bets and parlays. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 and older and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly and check the episode description for the full terms of the offer. And as always, Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts, we are on all the sites. YouTube and TikTok, JetPress4. Both of them, YouTube, a subscription. Holy crap. Subscription.
You got
that
it.
Really helps. Not a, like I said earlier, a subscription. And that helps. A like on the stream helps. A review on Apple Podcasts, all of that helps. So if you want to go see more Jets content than what we're going to get into right now with Senior Bowl stuff, that is how you make sure that happens. Let's just get into a little bit of an inverse of our old episodes where we would end doing a weekly draft spotlight talking about a player we think the Jets should draft. I don't think we ever said Will McDonald in any of them. We did say Joe Tippmann in one.
Yeah.
And who was third round last year? I'm blanking off the top of my head.
For the Jets?
The Jets.
Why am I blanking too? Carter Warren fourth.
I think there was a third.
Maybe there wasn't. There wasn't a third. No.
So yeah, I don't think we did Carter Warren, but we did do Tippmann. So if you want to check that out, that's how you do it. And maybe we'll have a better success rate this year because the Senior Bowl is coming wet. There were some duds. There were some studs, as is the case with these all-star showcase things. It kind of stunk a little bit because it seemed like a lot of the studs were at positions the Jets necessarily don't need that much. I know we said that about Will McDonald last year, but there was a lot of interior defensive linemen who were really good. There were a lot of cornerbacks who were very good. There were a lot of running backs who were very good. So, I mean, those are the positions that the Jets aren't clamoring out for right now. But there also were some good offensive linemen and wide receivers, which if the Jets need anything this year, it's offensive line and wide receivers with big exclamation points. And if I want to look at one offensive tackle that is not in the Taliesin Fuaga, J.C. Latham, or even the Fashanu in old case, kind of like a lesser-known guy that maybe the Jets could trade down for, maybe somehow get a second-round pick back for, something like that. I'm looking at Patrick Paul for Houston because so many of these guys see their stock rise and fall on the way in. Troy Fatanu, I think, pretty much got dinged as a guard with some of his arm measurements. I think Jordan Morgan was a little light. He might have to move to guard too. But Patrick Paul, that's an offensive tackle, 6'7", 333 with 36-inch arms and 86-inch wingspan, which is ungodly. I believe that's over 7 feet. I'm trying to do inches in the top of my head. I think that's 7'3" wingspan or right under it, if I remember inches correctly. Thank you, Mrs. Shanklin, for helping me convert that in second grade math.
That is such a great name. Shout out Mrs.
She was the worst teacher I ever had, so let's not give her too much credit, but screw you, Miss Shanklin. But anyway.
Wow, what if she sees this, man? That's so
she's not. She's probably infirmed by now anyway.
Damn.
Getting
Maybe she's a huge Jets fan. You don't know.
Getting back to Patrick Paul for Houston. Like physically, if you were in central casting and you wanted to draw a guy up on a board, here's what an offensive tackle should look like. It's Patrick Paul. Big, long, strong guy. Very good athlete, too. I mean, you really just can't get around this guy. Like, he's a good athlete, but even if, like, you have enough speed, like, if you're a Will McDonald edge bender and you want to just run around him, he's got just so much raw length. Like, for as big as Mekhi Becton is, as long arms as he wasn't functionally really good with that, if that makes any sense. Like, some guys are strong and big and have long arms, but they're not functional athletes. They can't really translate to the field. Patrick Paul can. And he came from an offense in Houston where they were throwing the ball a lot. His pass protection is very good, and he plays hard. Some offensive linemen, maybe they just don't have a sort of mean streak. And we've all seen a lineman like that. This guy plays mean. I don't know about Fuaga mean where he's throwing guys down every single play, but it's certainly there. And Robert Saleh likes guys like that because he's a big, angry dude when things are going good. So that's his kind of player. He will need a little bit of mechanical tweaking. He does play a little bit too upright, which that can sometimes just make his anchor and pass protection not so great when you're up and stiff. A little inconsistent. Like when he played some of his more like the higher end pass rushers, when you really want to shine, like he didn't really do that as much. So I'm not necessarily sure if he's going to be right away year one amazing, but for a guy with 44 career starts at left tackle, and he's got an NFL pedigree. I hate using that word too, like bloodlines and pedigree. It sounds kind of like eugenicsy, like when it's like, oh, because his dad was good, he's got to be good. But Patrick Paul does have a football background. His brother Chris Paul, not that Chris Paul, but was drafted in the 7th round in 2022. So that is a lot of positives in the Patrick Paul camp. I don't know if he'll go 10. I don't even know if he'll go top 20, but if they trade down and they end up in those late teens, early 20s, that's my offensive tackle of choice right there.
With the eugenics thing, you're telling me Jay Harbaugh is not one of the best special teams coordinators in the world? You're telling me that?
I just remember, if everybody remembers Madden 06, like they had a whole thing like that where like your parents' IQ and profession would determine how high your overall rating could be. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that. I think they got rid of that feature immediately, but people remember.
Yeah, that was an interesting time for sports games. I feel like obviously that's problematic and you can't do that now, but it was fun for its time. But yeah, I like Patrick Paul. I think whenever you have a guy with his natural athleticism and his ridiculous size, with I think it's 44 career starts he had at left tackle in college, and you have a guy with that experience and that upside, that's going to be someone that catches my eye. I do think that he still has to work on some things with his consistency. I haven't watched him, I think, as much as you. But overall, that's somebody, if the Jets are trading down or if they want to, I don't know where he's ultimately going to go. I think he definitely improved his stock at the Senior Bowl. I think I saw like 3rd round grades on him before the Senior Bowl. Maybe that goes up to like 2nd round.
He
now
seems very much like a blow up the combine kind of guy. He has a good like short shuttle and then he just shoots up.
Yeah.
I feel like he's that kind of player.
First round, he's going to have to jump a lot of tackles to go first round because there's just so many tackles in this class that are in that like 15 to 32 range. But I could see him continuing to rise, and he's definitely a target for the Jets if they go, past the first round and looking for an offensive tackle. I'm going to stick with the offensive side of the ball for my first Senior Bowl standout. There's a lot of good wide receivers in this class, which feels like a common trend at this point where almost every single receiver class is really good. I mean, the Jets didn't agree with that last year, but
because nowadays I feel like if you have a premium athlete, they go stick a receiver. That's where the money is. And that's,
the guys who used to be playing running back are now playing wide receiver. That's ultimately the biggest change that's happened. But again, the Jets didn't feel that way last year. They didn't have a single first-round grade on any wide receiver in last year's class.
Plus, if you're in college and you come in as like you always play both ways in high school. If you're a DB or wide receiver recruit and you're like that level of athlete, they're going to probably make you a receiver.
Right, and that's fair. A guy who wasn't nearly as highly recruited as a lot of the wide receivers in this class coming out of high school, but found a way onto the field and produced. I'm going to look at Ladd McConkey from Georgia, who not only has one of the best names in this class, but he has one name. I mean, I don't know if that's his real name.
Okay, it's Andrew. His middle name is Ladd.
Andrew Ladd McConkey. I'm so glad he goes by Ladd, though. That is great. when I'm looking at wide receivers, I think the one thing that I've learned over the years when trying to evaluate wide receivers coming into the NFL is there is one specific trait that you need to be good at, or at least that is the most common trend where it comes from college receivers becoming good NFL receivers. And that's, can you get open? Can you separate? Are you a good route runner? Ladd McConkey is one of the best wide receivers in this class as far as getting open is concerned, as far as separation, as far as route running. He was only a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. And when you go to Georgia and you're only a 3-star recruit, and Ladd McConkey is not the biggest guy, not the fastest guy, I think he's faster than people give him credit for, you're going to get overlooked by all the 5-star recruits they have there. But he worked his way up, found himself as a featured part of their offense. The dude can play. Like I said, he's a little undersized. He's 5'11-ish. I think they listed him at 6 foot. I don't think he's 6 foot. I don't know what he measured at the Senior Bowl, but I think he's like more like 5'11", 185, but he plays bigger than that. Like, he has really strong hands. He's tough too, like over the middle. When you see a guy like at that size, you worry about how they're going to handle making catches over the middle. I never got that was an issue from him watching him at Georgia. Played outside a little bit at Georgia too, but I think he's definitely more of a slot guy, not to pigeonhole him as like, oh, the undersized, scrappy white slot receiver. Like, I know that's going to be the common trope. Everyone's like, oh, look, it's another Wes Welker. But in a lot of ways, he kind of is. I really like Ladd McConkey, and I think he's someone who's probably not going to go round one because he just doesn't have the physical traits of guys like Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze and a lot of the top wide receivers in this class. But he's someone who I imagine is going to have a very long NFL career. Reminds me a little bit of Hunter Renfrow coming out of Clemson, but I think he's a better. I'd say he has better hands than Hunter Renfrow for sure. And he's also a little bit younger. Renfrow was like, 24 his rookie season, which that also helps. So I could see him being a target, maybe round 3, I think his stock really improved at the Senior Bowl because he had a great showing there. So I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up going, early day 2 at this point. I think round 1 is probably a stretch just because he doesn't have the physical traits, but he's someone you draft him, make him your wide receiver 3, day 1 starter, instant contributor. You go out and sign like a Calvin Ridley, or you get your wide receiver 2 in free agency. That would complete this Jets wide receiver room. Ladd McConkey is one of my favorite wide receiver prospects for the Jets outside of round 1.
The problem I have with McConkey, who's a good player, I think he's going to be probably like a second-round pick. I'd be shocked if I don't end up with like a top 75-ish grade on him by the end of things, is looking at players that I know it's like stereotypical, like, oh, the white guy receiver, especially with the Patriots, like Edelman, Danny Amendola, and stuff like that. But, well, number one, there are a lot of those in the NFL, and the one thing, though, is outside of like Wes Welker, have any of them really become like supers? I know Edelman was okay, but I mean, having Brady helps, number one.
Edelman was very good. Edelman was really good.
Yeah, but he wasn't as good as Welker.
No, but he had a few thousand yards. I mean, I'm not expecting Ladd McConkey to have 6 1,000-yard campaigns under his belt.
Well, I think the point, though, is if your ceiling is Julian Edelman, which I don't think that's like a crazy, like it's a stereotypical comp, but like it's a comp that I think makes sense. Similar measurables, good hands, tough over the middle. He's faster than you think. He's not like Amendola where he just didn't have the speed and the verticality. He does have some speed to him, but I feel like that is where he's going to be early in his career. And if you're drafting a guy like Edelman, if that's your ceiling, I don't know about like a top 50-ish pick on him.
I'm interested to see what he runs because I think he's faster than a lot of people give him credit for.
Oh, he'll be 4.4s easily. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to see what Bleacher Report's pro comparison was for him, and it says Deontay Johnson, so another slot guy. I think Deontay Johnson,
the worst hands ever, though. So I don't know if that's a good.
Yeah, I think in terms of play style, I guess I think Johnson's a good route runner, but yeah, his hands are definitely questionable. Although he was better with that this year, as someone who has him on my fantasy team. But I think that McConkey is a similar type of athlete to Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson, not overly explosive. He's not like Tyreek Hill out there, but he's a good athlete. And I think McConkey's a similar way where I would never say that athleticism is a weak spot in Ladd McConkey's game. Whereas someone like Julian Edelman, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a weak spot in Edelman's game. I would definitely say it was a weak spot in someone like Hunter Renfrow's game, who I think McConkey's definitely a better athlete and has better hands than Renfrow as well. So I don't know. I get the pushback, I should say. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar in the NFL, but I think he's exactly what the Jets need, which is a reliable chain mover. Also, he's like electric with the ball in his hands.
Yes.
Dude is a yak machine. And that's another thing that the Jets could really use in this offense, because outside of Garrett Wilson, I mean, I guess, Xavier Gibson fits that mold, but he's really not an NFL caliber wide receiver at this time. Whereas I think Ladd McConkey can step in and immediately contribute day one. So yeah, I think McConkey is better as a better prospect than someone like Edelman, but I think it's fair to say, I don't think he's going to be a superstar in the NFL.
But he'll be a solid role player.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a little freaky with my next player that I want to talk about because he lacks a real solid comparison. I thought about maybe I've seen some people compare him to Golden Tate in the past, which I don't know if that's accurate. Even a lot of people say, "Oh, he's like budget Deebo Samuel." I don't even know about that. Do you remember when Denard Robinson got picked by the Jaguars and his position was OW, offensive weapon?
Of course.
That's what I think this guy's going to end up being. And it's Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky, because this is just he's like 5'11". He's like a little over 210.
He's built like a running
back.
He's
wide receiver. It reminds me of Antonio Gibson coming out, where he was 220 playing wide receiver. It was just a weird build. The negatives with him, I think, are honestly pretty obvious. His route running tree is not very good at all. He almost ran barely any vertical routes, and not just go routes, just anything where he had to go vertically down the field. It was almost all horizontal. It was crossers, it was drags, it was screens. That's what they had him doing. So you look at that and you're like, well, what is this guy? Why would I even pick him? We don't know what position he plays. Can't really run routes. When he gets the ball in his hands, this dude is really, really electric. He's big. He has really good ball carrier vision, strong, knows where to go. He never really just panics. He does have good hands too, and he's got enough juice and long speed where I think he can make something happen. He's not a true wide receiver, 2. He's not going to be wide receiver 2 for the Jets if they take him, and probably the third round where a lot of people are saying he's going. But even with Breece Hall and even with Garrett Wilson, this team just lacks juice on offense. There's just no playmakers. You just need him anywhere you could get him. He's never going to be Deebo Samuel, but if you could use him in similar ways, using his speed on jet sweeps and going across the middle, maybe give him a couple carries every game. Imagine if Tavon Austin, when the Rams took him, imagine if he was bigger and he actually could kind of run the ball a little bit. He wasn't just a speed guy. That's what Malachi Corley, I think, could be. He's never going to probably be a 1,000-yard receiver, but maybe he runs for a couple times every game. He ends up with 700 receiving yards a season. If the Jets get a player like that with how much he could just impact this offense with a third-round pick, which they still have, I'm really excited about it. Just don't ask him to be too traditional, because that's not really a strong suit.
I think if you're a fan of Malachi Corley, you look at what the Niners have done with Deebo Samuel and you say, we hope he could be this guy. Dane said Quincy Enunwa with more speed. Definitely faster than Enunwa.
Enunwa was bigger too. He was a little more
He was taller than Corley for sure. He was built. Enunwa was almost built like a tight end in a lot of ways. Corley's just more stout, not stout, but he's shorter. He's built like a running back. But
he reminds me of, you ever watch old highlights of Kirby Puckett, the old baseball player for the center field? He's 5'8", but he's a fire hydrant. He's 220, and he's got these short, stubby, muscular arms. That's kind of the build with Malachi Corley.
Certainly in terms of yak and in terms of the ability to make plays after the catch, Enunwa was a fair comparison, because not only is Corley going to run through you, he'll run around you. The dude is dynamic once you get the ball in his hands. My issues with him, one of them you talked about, I think he's very underdeveloped as a route runner, which always raises major red flags for me as a receiver coming out of college. It's rarely something that you see a receiver prospect get better at significantly over the course of their NFL career. Now, I think Deebo is a fair comparison, because Deebo wasn't the most polished route runner coming out of college, and he got better at that, but also he went to probably the best possible situation for him, playing under Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. And also Deebo was just a better overall prospect than Corley. So that would be my number one concern. My number two concern is, do you have any faith that Nathaniel Hackett is going to use him correctly? Do you have any faith?
No, but I at least have some faith that maybe, because again, we already know straight up that Aaron Rodgers just makes up his own plays, as outlined in that report in The Athletic. He doesn't listen to Hackett all the time. I'm sure he could figure out some sort of way to get Malachi Corley on the move.
Maybe.
Now, I know that giving Nathaniel Hackett, who is painfully traditional in his offense,
that's my
a new age weapon like Malachi Corley may not be. It's that old meme of, there's that tin roof, horrible shed with a Lamborghini underneath it.
Yeah.
Where it's just not the right environment. But also, if last year doesn't shake up Hackett and say, you got to just wholesale philosophically change how you think about football, how you call plays, everything, then I think that he's lost at that point. So maybe there's some part of his atrophied brain that goes, all right, maybe we can get creative with Malachi Corley. He's tried it with Xavier Gibson. Like, imagine Corley getting the Xavier Gibson role.
I wouldn't hate that.
It's a clear improvement. And we like Gibson, but I mean, just athleticism-wise, there's no comparison.
Yeah, I mean, Corley's a lot bigger and tougher than Gibson. Gibson is definitely more flash than substance.
Exactly. And that limits what you could do with him. You can't run a guy that small, all the time.
For sure. He's going to get decked. Yeah, I don't mind Corley as like a mid-round dart throw because you're like, all right, we need some firepower in this offense. We need somebody who, when you get the ball in their hands, they are dynamic. They can make plays happen. The Jets don't really have that outside of, I'd say, Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall on offense. I like Tyler Conklin, but he's not that guy in terms of making plays happen after the catch and being just an elite yak guy. I don't know. Like, I think there's a lot of wide receivers I'd prefer over Corley just because he's underdeveloped as a route runner and because you don't usually see the gadget guys work out in the NFL unless they go to the perfect situation. And I think the Jets are definitely not that perfect situation for him. But hey, I wouldn't hate it if they drafted him because we need more firepower in this offense. So I completely agree. I'm going to talk about next my second guy, a position that when we were first talking about this, you mentioned that this wasn't necessarily a position of need for the Jets. And I kind of disagree. Interior defensive line, I think, is low-key a need for the Jets this offseason. They have
not like first 3 rounds need, I think, is the
not first round. Not first round, probably not second round, but third round. I think it's possible. I think it's especially knowing this regime, dude. Like they took Will McDonald in the first round last year. They 100%.
I still think he's going to be good. I still think it. They just
he's putting.
They won't play him. We don't know.
It was interesting. An interesting note is a tangent, really quick. Rich Cimini released an article recently about like Will McDonald and what he went through as a rookie, and it was detailing how McDonald was frustrated at times because it was a shock to his system. Dude was playing every down at Iowa State. He was playing almost every single down. Goes to the Jets. He's a healthy scratch week 2. Barely getting on the field. When he is on the field, he doesn't play more than 10 snaps a game. That was a lot. And I imagine that was difficult for him to deal with. But I do love the way that Cimini kind of pointed out that he's not sulking about that. He's not like, oh, I want to get out of here. This team's not for me. He's already back in the Jets facility practicing. He's planning to put on like 15 pounds this offseason, which is absolutely a good idea. Like 100% do that. I think that's going to be huge for him. So hopefully, I think they're going to need him because I don't think Bryce Huff's going to be back, but we've talked about that a lot. But anyway, the second guy I'm going to talk about is defensive tackle Michael Hall Jr. out of Ohio State. I think this is the perfect Robert Saleh player. Like if I were to build a defensive tackle or, somebody in that mold from scratch, maybe I'd make him a little bit bigger than Michael Hall, but I think he's exactly the type of player that Robert Saleh would fall in love with. Super athletic, undersized dude. He's like 6'2", probably 285-ish, like legit, probably similar to like Michael Clemens build and John Franklin Myers build. I would like to see him put on maybe another like 10 pounds in the NFL to like truly stick as a defensive tackle. But I think he's someone that was really kind of misused at Ohio State, similar to how Iowa State misused Will McDonald and had him lined up at like 3 tech and 1 tech, where it's like, what are you doing? It's Will McDonald, dude. He's like 235. What are you doing? Michael Hall was also asked to line up as like a 1 tech sometimes and as a nose tackle. And for a guy who's 6'2", 280, 280, 285 on a good day, I don't think that was the best way to use him. Now, they did play him all over, so he has that versatility, but I could see him absolutely thriving in a system like Robert Saleh because, right, like Robert Saleh is attacking 4-3 because he has that athleticism. He has that really good first step, high motor guy as well, high energy. That's the type of guys that Saleh loves. And I think we've seen a lot of players like this in that mold succeed in the NFL in recent years. Everybody, would always point to Aaron Donald, but I think even more recently, Kalijah Kancey had a good rookie season. Kobe Turner, who we interviewed before the draft, we have an interview up on the Jet Press with Kobe Turner from back in like April last year. He was incredible as a rookie. And one of the knocks coming out of Wake Forest for him was, he's a little undersized. I think it's a similar thing with Michael Hall. Plus, dude's only 20 years old. He doesn't turn 21 until June. So you have a lot of untapped potential with Michael Hall. I think the athleticism is there. He's basically, in my opinion, like a more athletic, maybe a little less powerful Michael Clemens. And so I think you literally
add less mean, I think, too. He's probably a nicer guy.
I don't know about personality-wise. Probably talks a little bit more, maybe has like a little bit less of a deep voice. It'd be crazy if he didn't. But I don't
think it's humanly possible. There's only the baritone can only go so low.
Yeah, that's kind of the mold that I envision for Michael Hall, and I think he can really find his footing in this Jets defensive line. I think this is a scheme that could absolutely maximize his talents. Now, hopefully, if the Jets were to draft him, he'd be able to develop under Robert Saleh for a few years, because I'm not sure if day one he's going to be. I don't think day one he's going to be the player that I envision for him down the line, but give him like 2-3 years to develop. I think he could be a really, really good interior pass rusher, especially if he puts on like another 10 pounds. So that's somebody I can see the Jets absolutely falling in love with. Maybe a third round pick, maybe in that range. It depends on how he tests. If he tests well, I could see him skyrocket, but that's probably where he is right now.
The problem that I'm having, and feel free to call me a hypocrite because I just said that Malachi Crow is really good because of his Debo-ish traits.
Sure.
Like, there is a lot of risk when you're saying, oh, we could just draft, this guy light and he'll be similar to this guy. I feel like a lot of undersized defensive tackles have flamed out in the wake of Aaron Donald being as good as he has. So everybody's like, oh, of course you don't need to add weight. You could just be like Aaron. No, Aaron Donald is a one-of-one athlete whose ears have more muscles than like my chest has. He's just a unique physical player that you can't really equal. Like, I feel like a lot of guys did that too with J.J. Watt, where they said, oh, I know you're big, but you could stay on the edge like J.J. Watt. And then, of course, they're not as good as J.J. Watt, and they flame out. But Brian Sternbeck actually makes a good point here.
He does.
Because he said Cantu would have been a better first-round pick. He's talking about Kalijah Cantu, got picked 19th overall by the Bucs last year out of Pitt. Yeah. I was not that high on Kalijah Cantu.
I remember this conversation last year.
Yeah, because I just thought, well, he's especially because he was a Pitt guy too. I'm thinking like, all right, people are going to try and draft Aaron Donald again, and he's not as good as Aaron Donald, and he'll struggle against NFL. And I mean, he wasn't unbelievable, but he had a really nice rookie year for what they asked him to do. Bucs went to the playoffs. I think he played a big part in that defense. Like, a lot of good things to say about Kalijah Cantu. So that may have reignited my interest in these undersized, pass rush first defensive tackles. The problem with Hall, because there's a lot of stuff to like about him. High motor, versatile, young guy. The numbers weren't there, but he played a lot better than the numbers would suggest if you watch the Ohio State defense. The thing I'm worried about is if they want to draft interior defensive linemen, I want a run stuffer. Because that's what I think they needed. Al Woods was supposed to be that, but number one, there's three problems. Number one, he's old. Number two, he blew out his Achilles, I believe. So that might be it for Al Woods' career, unfortunately. And he just had so little pass rush upside that he almost like couldn't play in like the middle of the year. Yes, and that's when the run defense started to suffer because it was just, he had nothing. Like he could barely even get a pressure in like an entire couple games. So you need to I know it's way easier said than done. Find a good run stuffing defensive tackle who could rush the passer like that. Of course, that's what everybody wants. But
why don't they just get a Vita Vea? What the hell, man?
Exactly, yeah. But if they draft a defensive tackle as good as Hall is, I feel like that'd just be another John Franklin Myers-y guy to throw onto the fire. Whereas I would like a more traditional line up in 0 and 1 tech, eat up space, stuff the run. Haloti Ngata. He's not going to be as good as Haloti Ngata, but that's kind of the guy I'm looking for. I've seen a couple guys in other podcasts. You mentioned Devondre Sweat from Texas, big, strong. Like Byron Murphy's the better player, I think.
I'd love Byron Murphy, but I don't think he gets past. He might not even go past round 1. Like
I don't think so either. Like he's the better player, but Sweat as a run stuffer, I think would be the better fit with the Jets. Like Hall's a good player. Yeah, I just don't know about the fit.
I think two things on that. One, I think I'm just resigned to the fact that Robert Saleh does not prioritize that at all, and I do not.
He should.
I've resigned myself.
We know Woody listens to us and tells Robert Saleh about it, so
I think yes and no, because yes, in the sense that they probably can use a little more beef in the interior defensive line, but no, in the sense that I mean it works. It works regardless. It works without it. Obviously, I think Quinnen Williams being there is the piece that pulls it all together. And because he's so good against the run, that's why they're able to survive guys like Quentin Jefferson, who had a very good year, but definitely is not particularly good against the run. I think, and I guess the second part of this is I think Michael Hall can be kind of your replacement for Quentin Jefferson because he's a free agent this offseason. I don't know what kind of contract he's going to get, but I wouldn't be stunned if it was similar to the deal Sheldon Rankins got from Houston, probably a little bit less because I think he's a tad older. He doesn't have the same draft pedigree. He's kind of bounced around a lot more than Rankins did. But he's coming off his best year of his career, Quentin Jefferson. So I don't know if the Jets are going to be able to get him back for the bargain that they did last year. And if they're looking for a replacement for Jefferson, I think Hall's a perfect like third defensive tackle that you'd want to bring in and play him on passing downs, play him in that role. I don't think they're going to target a guy whose specialty is run defense anywhere, before in the first like 4 or 5 rounds of the draft. If I know one thing about Robert Saleh, he's going to look for athleticism. He's going to look for pass rush upside. If the run defense is there, that's a plus, that's a bonus, but I don't think that is priority. So that's what I would say. And then I remember having the Kalijah Cansey conversations last year. And I remember one of your talking points, one of the things you said was, well, do we like Kalijah Cansey because he's Kalijah Cansey, or do we think we like Kalijah Cansey because we think he could be Aaron Donald, or because he fits that mold? My argument against that would be he was pretty good as a rookie. He was good. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be Aaron Donald, but he was pretty good. And then Kobe Turner, also in a similar mold, had 10 sacks as a rookie or something like that in like the fourth.
Also, who was Kobe Turner lining up next to?
Sure, but he was still good in his own right. Like, obviously, you have to go to the right situation. But guess what? If they drafted Michael Hall, who is he lining up next to? Quinnen Williams. So it's not like the Jets don't have that. I mean, I would say Quinnen Williams probably in Aaron Donald's tier at this stage, which is that almost sounds blasphemous to say, I know, but I don't think Aaron Donald was the best defensive tackle in football last year anymore. Is that crazy to say? Is it crazy to say?
I feel like he was, but just not by like before. It used to be like, Aaron Donald is not even. We didn't even rank Aaron Donald, and then there's everybody else. Like
it was like CMC and everybody. It's like kind of how we talk about running backs, where it's like Christian McCaffrey and then everyone else.
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't think it's at that point anymore, but he's still really good.
I think it's fair to say that guys like Quinnen, Dexter Lawrence, Chris Jones are in Donald's tier at this stage.
And that is not a knock on Aaron Donald. He's 32 years old, for crying out loud. Most guys don't even play that long.
Aaron Donald's maybe the best football player that I've ever watched in my life. So that's definitely not a knock on Aaron Donald. But yeah,
you can make the case.
I think Michael Hall makes sense. Really quick, I know you just responded in the chat. I want to get to this. Gregory said, why are you talking defense? We need linemen on offense. First of all, Mike already talked about Patrick Paul. That was one of his players that he discussed. If you missed that, you can rewind it and watch that. Second, the Jets are not going to draft an offensive lineman with every single pick in this draft. They're just not going to. And they're almost definitely not going to only draft offensive players. It's just not. That's just not how it works. The Jets need to prioritize offensive line and wide receiver. Those are their 2 biggest needs, but they're not the only positions that they could potentially target in this draft. I feel like that's obvious, but I wanted to point that out.
One position that they might target, if some Jets Twitter mavens had their way, would be quarterback. Because even though Rodgers hasn't played yet, everybody's already preparing for what's life going to be like after Aaron Rodgers. And I think because of, the Kansas City model, Mike Francesa, I could do a proper Francesa, but I'm not gonna now. But
okay.
It kills the parties, I promise.
Now I can't believe you. You can't just say that and then just not do it.
Well, the problem with Francesa is, like, if you mess it up, it sounds really bad, and I don't want to do it live on a stream.
Pressure, I understand. We'll do it after the stream.
It kills at parties, but the Kansas City model, which was his, he had a whole segment about that, was obviously drafting a guy like Mahomes, or the Green Bay model, Rodgers, Jordan Love, letting him sit for a little bit, clean break, then you get your starter for the next couple of years. Now, that's kind of going away, and with the way rookie contracts are structured, that's when you get him cheap. You want him to play quickly, and because guys are such good athletes now that they're probably better right away than they were. I remember when Peyton Manning started, they're like, what do you mean he's starting as a rookie? He's not going to sit for 2 years? Like, that was the discourse around Peyton Manning. But a lot of Jets fans really want them to take a quarterback at 10. And I'm not happy that the quarterbacks weren't necessarily amazing in Mobile, but in this sense that they weren't super impressive. And I think the guys the Jets fans may have been looking at were kind of average, and that may have ruined any chance of them being taken at 10. Because it doesn't matter what order you have the top 3 guys in. There's been a weird Jaden Daniels QB 1 or 2 push. I don't know where that's coming from, because that doesn't make any sense at all to me.
I've seen some rank him ahead of Drake May. I've seen some saying Drake May might fall.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. They did that with is he going to be the CJ Stroud this year, where he just for no reason just like slips for no reason?
I mean, you never know. Sometimes it happens, though.
I mean, Stroud didn't slip. He went 2. But, there's all this like stuff about, CJ Stroud is stupid because of that BuzzFeed quiz of a test he took.
I think there was a time when Josh Rosen was considered maybe a top 2 pick, and then he fell. So it could happen. You never know how it's going to go.
I still don't know how he didn't pan out, man. He was so good at college. He had a rocket on.
Zero athleticism, went to a terrible situation. That was about it.
Oh, man, he had a great arm. But the top 3 quarterbacks are Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jane Daniels. You might switch May over Williams. Some people might. But anyway, it's one of those. That's pretty much the top three. And with Chicago, I know there's a whole keep Justin Fields thing. I'm a big Justin Fields fan. I think he's overhated. But even I would trade him, get a pick back, and then if you get the number one pick 2 years in a row and never take a quarterback, that's a bad luck. So I think they're going to take one of them. Washington, obviously, I think is taking a quarterback with Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn. And New England, I think, is taking a quarterback. They pretty much said they're going to take a quarterback. Gerard Mayo did. So they're not going to be on the board for the Jets. If one of them were available at 10, I hear you out. They're not available. The top three guys that the Jets could take, and they're in some order 4 through 6. Because Spencer Rattler, I think, is now 7. I think he'll be like a 3rd, 4th-ish pick. The three guys that the Jets fans might have been looking at were Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and J.J. McCarthy. And I think all of their – I know McCarthy wasn't at the Senior Bowl, but all of their flaws are very well known at this point. McCarthy, I barely even want to entertain because it was obvious that Jim Harbaugh didn't even really trust McCarthy. I mean, when did he say, go win a game with your arm in college?
No.
He didn't. He won a game throwing 8 passes.
If you listen to Harbaugh, I think he said McCarthy's going to be the first overall pick. Didn't he say that?
Well, he's trying to make sure the Michigan fans don't, because Michigan fans are actually pissed at him now that he left. So he's trying to make sure they don't hate him now.
Here's what he needs to do. I think he said he's like Sam, or he said he's going to be JJ McCarthy's going to be the first quarterback taken in his class. He can do that. Trade up to number 1 and just draft him himself now. He can make it happen. He can manifest it.
The problem with McCarthy too, though, is I get such Zach Wilson vibes from it. Like on top of the fact they look identical, and I get that same sort of vibe, which is not.
They really look that similar. Hold on.
It's not very empirical. It's frightening, but also, right?
I could see. Oh yeah,
undersized guy, live arm, but not like a howitzer of an arm.
He looks
clean pockets a lot. Like there's a lot of Wilson-y traits in JJ McCarthy.
He looks even more like Zach's brother, Isaac. That's my.
Well, there's another one. There's another Wilson.
Oh, you don't know Isaac Wilson's at Utah. You don't know about that?
Oh no,
he looks just like Zach too. Yeah, he's at Utah.
Well, they're brothers. I mean, that kind of.
I know, but he looks like very, very similar. Like, especially when he's got the eye black on, he looks identical. It's crazy.
I always hate when people go, "Oh, you look just like your father." It's like, well, I look 50% like him. That's how it's supposed to work. But,
all right.
But anyway, Nix and Penix. Penix, I thought was probably going to be my QB4. I think he still is right now. I haven't finalized everything, but on top of the fact that his injury history, you talk about red flags for injury history. I mean, he's got it. He tore both ACLs and both legs. Not a great athlete. Very accurate, but I think he just didn't show enough arm talent. He gets the ball where it needs to go sometimes, but he's when you watch a guy like him and then a guy, I know this is a top shelf comparison, but I remember watching Justin Herbert at the Senior Bowl live when I was there. I'm like, wow. I'm like, who is that? You could tell very on that Penix just doesn't have that arm. He goes to a cold weather city. Some of the teams that have been thinking about taking him, Minnesota, where you got to go to Green Bay in the December, and Denver, and you really got to worry about that. Same with Nix too. I didn't like Nix's arm talent. The whole thing about him is he's supposed to be get it out quick, accurately, which is kind of game managery, but he was really good at that at Oregon. I think completed 77% of his passes, and he was even struggling with that. He looked more like the guy at Auburn who was not even a thought of an NFL prospect when he was at Auburn. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't bench him at Auburn. Then he goes to Oregon, better coaching by a mile, good offensive players around him, Bucky Irving, Troy Franklin, who may be Jets draft spotlight at some point in the future, and he looks better. I'm not super confident any of these quarterbacks vying for QB4. I still think it's probably Penix just because I like his deep accuracy so much, but man, I'm not in on any of them for the Jets in the first round.
I don't think, even if, say, Bo Nix or whoever went into the Senior Bowl and absolutely balled out, I don't think there was ever a world where the Jets would consider drafting a quarterback at the 10th overall pick. I don't see that as a possibility. I never saw it as a possibility. It never made any sense. I honestly haven't seen a ton of people say it. And there's a few people that are like, oh, you just got to draft someone to, develop behind him. And that's the way you got to go the Jordan Love route. Look how it's working in Green Bay. I get that sentiment, but it realistically is not going to happen. You have to look at it from the Jets' perspective, from Joe Douglas's perspective. They know that they have to win this year. They know that they have to make the playoffs.
They had to win last year too. Will McDonald.
I don't think the pressure was on them as much as it is this year. Last year, clearly, they were able to get a mulligan. I don't think that they went into last year thinking, man, if this doesn't work out, we're going to get fired. I don't think they thought that. Especially after the Rodgers thing happened. Obviously, they were pretty much given assurance at that point. But I don't think that was their mindset. Right now, that has to be their mindset. It is as abundantly clear as possible. There is not a regime that is on the hot seat more than maybe like Mike McCarthy in Dallas. But other than that, there is not a regime that is on the hot seat more than Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas right now.
Maybe McDermott?
No, I wouldn't say McDermott. I wouldn't even say McDermott. I think because I wouldn't say so at all. I disagree. I like Sean McDermott. I think he's a good coach. And what, you think they're going to fire like Brandon Beane and stuff too?
I feel like it's just how many times you're going to go out in the second round kind of thing.
Yeah, it sucks, man. Chiefs are great. You're running to a great team. Bills are also a great team. They were. It's not like the Bills have been just bad. Like they've genuinely just unfortunately can't get past the second round of the playoffs. But that doesn't. I don't think that should be grounds for firing, despite as many Bills fans that might be.
I mean, I don't necessarily either, but I mean, I feel like that sentiment's out there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if they like miss the playoffs next year, sure, I can see him getting fired. Yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's getting fired. But Saleh and Douglas, it is like you have to make the playoffs. You have to do this with a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 13 years. That is about as much of a hot seat as it gets. You have to do
next trick.
Literally do something that has not been done in 13 years, or else you're getting fired. That's a pretty hot seat. So because of that, I cannot see a world where the Jets use a premium asset, a top 10 draft pick, on a player who is not going to play this year. Because there's a good chance that the Jets, like this current regime, never even gets to see that player play if that happens. So I can't see a world where that happens. I think, like you, I like Michael Penix the most out of those top three. That is like aside from the top three guys. The red flags are obvious. He's an older prospect. He's turning 24 before the season starts. He's got major medical red flags, but as an overall player, I like him. I like watching him play.
Left-handed too, so that means you basically got to make the whole offense backwards for him.
That's true, and it just looks weird when you see him. But yeah, I don't think any of them were ever in consideration at the 10th overall pick, and nothing that happened in the Senior Bowl changed my mind on that. I would be stunned and livid if the Jets used the 10th overall pick on a quarterback.
But do you think they'll take one at some point? Third, fourth, fifth round?
My guess, maybe with one of those 7th round comp picks. That's going to be, I'll throw that out there.
That's just like basically a priority training camp invite if you take
the reasoning for that is that now you got that guy on a 4-year contract and you could try and develop him. As opposed to if they're an undrafted free agent, they're not on that 4-year contract. So I think that could be something. Like I think that right now they're projected to have like 3 of the last like 6 picks in a draft. It's really weird.
I mean, you got to watch till like the very end this time.
Yeah, well, they have Mr. Relevant, or they're projected to have Mr. Relevant for the first time ever. The Jets have never had Mr. Relevant. They're projected to have Mr. Relevant this year.
So maybe we can get Brock Purdy.
It's so weird. It's going to depend on. I think it was the Dan Feeney loss. Dan Feeney and then Chris Manhertz, he's a tight end.
He was on the Jets?
He was on the Jags. No. He was on the Jags, and he signed with the Broncos, I want to say. And that's like whichever one the comp formula decides is more valuable is going to get that last pick. That's how it works.
I don't want to live in a world where Dan Feeney's considered valuable.
They're valuable enough to maybe get the last pick in a draft. Like that's what it's going to come down to. So whichever one right now over the cap is projecting the Jets to slightly come out ahead with that, but it's really difficult to say. But anyway, so if the Jets get Mr. Relevant, you can thank Dan Feeney for it.
First time the Jets fans will ever say thank you, Dan Feeney. So first time for everything.
He's a fine backup offensive lineman.
Debatable. Moving on, we're going to get to some bold predictions. I feel like 2 each would be a pretty good way to close out the show. In terms of stuff. But
I think I have something to say first, Mike.
Do you? We're all right, Skippy. What do you got?
I'm just going to talk about the ad read, the DraftKings thing.
Yeah, okay.
Ad read from our friends over at DraftKings because, hey, Jets fans, DraftKings is offering a fantastic sign-up bonus during the postseason. It says ahead of the postseason. We are in the postseason. In fact, it is the Super Bowl coming up this Sunday. This is a perfect time to sign up. You can place a $5 first bet on anything to instantly claim $150 in bonus bets. You'll also be rewarded with a separate no-sweat single-game parlay every single day when you opt in. That's a lot. The best part is that you'll receive both rewards even if your first bet loses. When you join DraftKings, make sure to sign up with our code FSBETS that is on the screen for those watching on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Using our code FSBETS not only gets you these great bonuses, but also directly supports our podcast. If you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, make sure to use the code FSBETS, that is FSBETS, to maximize your first bets and parlays. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 and older and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check the episode description for full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. I blazed through that last part. I feel like I should be doing an infomercial right now. That was fun. All right, let's.
They're 70% off this weekend. Come down.
Yeah, I felt like I was like an auctioneer. Let's do some bold predictions. Mike, hit me with your first Jets bold prediction for the offseason.
The Jets do not take a tackle in the first round because they will have signed Tyron Smith.
Ooh, okay, sure. Okay.
Because their conventional wisdom says tackle in the first round to get your long-term guy. But also, Woody Johnson likes stars. Woody Johnson likes names. It's New York. Tyron Smith is a gigantic injury risk. I mean, gigantic. But you know who else is a gigantic injury risk? Mekhi Becton and Aaron Rodgers.
And David Bakhtiari.
Who they're also considering. So I feel like that just comes with the territory at this point. If you get 17 healthy games of Tyron Smith, even in this compromised state, I think he's still a second-team all-pro level talent at the offensive tackle position. He's just so good, so consistent, so effective, done it forever, been to the playoffs. Like, he's the guy you want. He's the guy you're hoping Olu Fashanu could turn into at some point, especially because he was not very good coming out of USC, and then he just made himself into this unbelievable tackle. He's going to be expensive too. He's probably going to need a multi-year deal, and he's older and he's hurt. I get all that, but if there's even an inkling that he wants to come to the Jets and he's going to consider it, I think Woody's got to throw the kitchen sink at him.
The issue obviously is injuries. You said if you get 17 games out of him, that'd be amazing. He is not. I just looked it up. The last time that Tyron Smith has played more than 13 games in a season, Mike, you know what year it was?
2018.
2015.
15
is the last year. That's 8 years ago. Is the last 9 years ago is the last time that Tyron Smith has played more than 13 games in the season. Granted, he played 13 games in a row, like in a season, 4 years in a row. So, I mean, I guess he played most of the year, but he was still hurt. If you look at the last few years, he
still made 8 Pro Bowls and 5 All-Pro teams. He's probably a Hall of Famer, being honest.
He should be a Hall of Famer. He's a 2-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second-team All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler, all 2010s guy. He should be. He's not going to have a ring unless, I don't know when, unless he goes to the Jets and they win it in 2024. But
hush up.
Probably not going to have a ring unless he wins one really soon, which that potentially hurts his case, which is dumb, but he might be. The last few years, 13 games last year. That was a big step. It was the first time he'd done that since 2019. 2022 played 4 games, 2021, 11 games, and 2020, 2 games. So definitely the injury concerns. But like you said, a lot of the Jets options, unless they're going first-round tackle, are going to be major injury risks. I think, and I mentioned this before we did the show, and you mentioned that you're going to talk about Tyron Smith. I think if the Jets are going to go the aging, veteran, injury-riddled offensive lineman, they're probably just going to go David Bakhtiari. I'm not saying that's my preference. I think I would prefer Tyron Smith. He was at least healthy last year. Bakhtiari, that knee is a real issue, man. I don't know what's going on with his knee, but he couldn't play this year. He's got serious concerns with that knee. So if I would prefer Tyron Smith, but I just think if they're like, hey, let's sign an injury-riddled old all-pro left tackle, they're just going to go David Bakhtiari because he's buddies with Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hate that.
That's worked so well so far.
Yeah. I wouldn't hate that. I think it's just still more likely they go tackle in the draft than go receiver in free agency, which brings me to my first bold prediction, because my first bold prediction, and I don't know how bold this is, but I'm projecting the Jets to sign Calvin Ridley, and I have a dollar figure too. I said 4 years, $70 million. I think is roughly around what he's going to make. I think that's like $17.5 million per year. Seems reasonable to me for a guy who's, he's genuinely a very, very good player. I don't think he's a true number one. He's going to get paid a lot of money this offseason, but he's not going to get paid as much as T. Higgins if he hits the market. T. Higgins is going to be like $24 million a year or some shit. Like he's going to be making ridiculous money. So yeah, 17.5 is a lot for Ridley. You have it out after 2 years. He'll be 31, 32 by that point, which is crazy. He's like 29 already, which feels very old, but he was an old prospect coming out of Alabama. But I think it's very likely that the Jets try and make a big wide receiver move in free agency before we get to the draft. I don't know how likely Mike Evans is going to be. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like Devontae Adams is a realistic possibility. Probably the same goes for T. Higgins, and I definitely don't want to pay him as much as he's going to get. Calvin Ridley is right in that sweet spot where I think he'd be an awesome number 2 alongside Garrett Wilson, and I think he's realistically going to be available. So that's my first bold prediction.
I mean, I don't hate it. Even though I got my reservations about Ridley, I don't hate it.
Sure.
Going on to my second one, this is going to be wide receiver related as well, because I believe in a very bold manner, not only will the Jets get Mike Evans or Calvin Ridley, one of those two.
Okay. Or Calvin Ridley. Okay.
But they're also going to draft Rome Odunze and just have this super team of receivers out there, especially if they sign Tyron and they get tackle taken care of. Then that means you're free to use number 10 on a receiver. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is locked into the top 3 or 4. He's not going. I think he could pretty much get his Cardinals jersey already.
Yeah, he's going top 5. He's
going top 5. Probably 4 to Arizona. Maybe New England gets a veteran and gets with him, which would be awful, but who knows?
No, that'd be great. Let them sign Russell Wilson, and they could do that. Let's do that. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is not going to taunt the Jets for however long.
All right, but I'd rather that than draft Jaden Daniels, and that turns out to be really good. Like, I don't know, man.
I don't know, the 3rd best quarterback in a weak quarterback draft, not that at 3.
Okay, let them do that, and let's see what I'm just any quarterback the Patriots draft, I get worried. I know they drafted Mac Jones. I knew you were going to say that, but I still get worried.
They also drafted Kevin O'Connell, and rest in peace, Ryan Mallett.
Okay, all right. Oh yeah, he did die. That's crazy. And I guess Bailey's happy, but
Jimmy G was the best one. He's not even that good. So,
well, I mean, the best excluding Tom Brady, I imagine.
I mean, no, Tom Brady, of course, as we all know, preordained fell from the heavens. That's what Patriots fans have you believe. Fair. It was just immaculate conception appeared on the team. But anyway, Belichick had no hand in that. But anyway, we're going to move on to the receivers because it looks like there is a competition for wide receiver too, and it's Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze. I'm still in the Neighbors camp. Like people go, oh, Odunze is good at contested catches. Well, he's like 6 foot. They're not going to ask him to do contested catch stuff. I fell into that trap with N'Keal Harry when he came out of Arizona State, and he couldn't separate. With like, oh, he's great at contested catches. I'm like, they're not going to ask him to be a contested catch guy at his size in the NFL, and he stunk because of it.
Remember what I was talking about earlier about watching wide receivers, and the first thing I look for is can they separate? That is the N'Keal Harry rule for me because I also like N'Keal Harry, and look at what happens. But thankfully, Neighbors and Odunze both passed that test. They can separate.
Then again, you know who did separate a lot in college? Darius Stewart.
Yeah, man. I don't know, dude. But he was
that
also
was a weird one.
He was also like 35 when the Jets drafted him, so whatever.
I feel like they never even gave him a chance, kind of.
Yeah,
he's just like here and gone, just like you blink and you miss him.
I don't think he ever signed with another team. At least never played in a game after the Jets.
Yeah.
Weird situation with him.
Just gone. But anyway, because he was good in Alabama. Getting back to Neighbors Odunze, Odunze, I think, is firmly wide receiver 3. I think there's, like with the quarterbacks, a bit of a gap between him and Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas and Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. All these other guys, there could be like 16 receivers first 2 rounds. Like, this is a deep receiver class. But
we say this every single year. It happens every year.
But with no second round pick, Aaron Rodgers, you might need to go and shop at Neiman Marcus instead of bargain bin shopping. And that's where Odunze comes in. And then you have this super team of Odunze is the X, Ridley in the slot, Garrett Wilson on the other side. I don't care who's throwing you the ball. That's impressive. Somebody's going to be open.
I love that. But then I imagine that wide receiver core. I imagine that being the wide receiver core that the Jets have. And then I think, damn, Tyron Smith got hurt week 2 and Billy Turner starting at left tackle. And that's my fear. That's my fear, Mike.
Carter Warren, don't be that pessimistic.
And look, man, I'm not putting anything past this team. I think they might bring back Billy Turner and he's your backup left tackle, whatever. I don't know. It's like the whole, and I said this before the show too. It's like the whole, like the meme where it was Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell. And it's like, oh, like when Burrow's trying to throw to Jamar Chase, he's wide open, but he's getting sacked because nobody's protecting him. I think it'd be a big mistake to go into the year with your left tackle plan being Tyron Smith or David Bakhtiari. Like I'm just resided in that. I think that'd be a big mistake. Unless they go out and they sign David Bakhtiari or whoever, and they also draft somebody. I absolutely love the idea of a Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley, Roma Dunze wide receiver trio. That would be one of the best trios in the entire league, maybe the best from 1 to 3. But man, like I would have serious concerns about this offensive line and question marks. And I would be surprised at this point if the Jets don't draft a tackle with their first pick. And I always said that last year. We were talking about what they're going to pick, and then they ended up picking a defensive end and a backup pass rusher. So you never know. But I think by far they're most likely, or the best route for them would be to draft or sign a wide receiver and then draft a tackle. But we'll see. I don't know. That would be wild. That would be wild for sure. I'm deciding between a few because I had 4 prepared. Do you want me to go like? I have a couple of ones that are like not super like important, but they're like bold predictions. You know what? I'll throw it out there because I saw people, and I wanted to talk about this because I saw people shit on this on Twitter. I think the Jets are going to sign Derrick Henry. That's
okay.
That's my
Tony Dew's connection.
Tony Dew's connection. I don't think it would be the most important move of the entire offseason, but it would be a high-profile one. And contrary to what people seem to believe, Derrick Henry's still good. He's not Dalvin Cook. Take it from somebody who was screaming all offseason that Dalvin Cook was no longer good. I mean, maybe Derrick Henry's going to suck next year. As of this year, he was still a pretty good player. He's not prime Derrick Henry. He's not rushing for 2,000 yards again, but he's still good. He ranked above average in rushing yards over expected compared to someone like Dalvin Cook, who was dead last the year before the Jets signed him in that. PFF grades, take him with a grain of salt. Derrick Henry was the third highest graded running back by PFF last year. Again, I don't really fully trust their running back grades, but also just watch the dude. He's still a good player. I don't think he's prime Derrick Henry, but he is a perfect fit for what the Jets need. Jets fans are going to be so scared off because of the Dalvin Cook thing. As soon as I proposed that on Twitter, people are like, what? There was two responses. One, Derrick Henry's washed. He's not washed. 2, how are they going to afford him? They don't have enough cap space. They're going to spend all this.
They don't pay any running backs.
Derrick Henry, the Jets gave Dalvin Cook $7 million in August last year.
And he was one of the highest paid backs in the league.
He was the highest paid free agent running back signed that offseason in terms of average annual value was Dalvin Cook, and they did it in August. All right. I just looked at Henry's numbers.
They're ruining my great game because Derrick Henry had 280 carries in 17 games, and that led the league. People used to get 400 carries.
Oh, yeah. Wait, last year he led the league in carries?
Yep. 4th time in 5 years.
Dude, Derrick Henry is one of
the only time he didn't was when he played 8 games, and even then he averaged 117 yards a game.
Derrick Henry is a prime example of somebody who's defying all logic when it comes to running backs, because I thought he was going to be washed 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I was like, it's probably it. It's probably it for him. He's going to go downhill. He just has so many carries. It's not even age. The dude has been run into the ground
since he was at Alabama.
Since he was at Alabama, and now in the NFL, dude's he's led the league in carries, like 3 or 4 years? Like crazy.
4 out of 5, and he averaged 27 carries a game the year he got hurt. So he would have led it if he played that whole year.
And the dude's still good. Like he is an absolute tank. Look, I don't think this is a Dalvin Cook situation at all. Maybe he comes to the Jets and he does suck because eventually running backs hit
Reese
the wall.
was also like 4th in yards though, with literally nobody around him. So I don't know if you want to like put an ankle weight on that.
Well, see, here's the thing. I'm not signing Derrick Henry to play 40% of snaps. I'm signing him because he fits exactly the mold of a running back that the Jets need. I've talked about this in the past when I was talking about A.J. Dillon. The Jets need a short yardage guy. They need somebody who can grind out yards, a guy that they can stick in the red zone when they're at like the 3-yard line, and they can just trust him to get 2 or 3 yards, because that's what Derrick Henry does. I don't think he's going to be a guy that you're trusting or not trusting, but that you want to be breaking 80-yard runs. Like that's not what Derrick Henry is doing at this stage.
Well, he still can.
I was going to say, although he still can do that, that's not why you're signing him. But I think they need a running back in that mold. He has connections to the coaching staff because Tony Dews was his position coach in Tennessee. You have obviously multiple connections to the Tennessee staff with Todd Downing on the staff as well. I think it's a perfect fit. And I don't think it's going to cost that much. Really, what I wrote down as projection, 1 year, $6 million, and that's with incentives. Cap hit's lower than that. I think that's a realistic thing where they can get him 1 year, max of $6 million. Maybe the cap hit's like $4 million, and they get hit an additional $2 million with incentives.
Yeah. He also might be milestone hunting though too. He's only 500 yards away from 10,000 and 10 touchdowns away rushing from 100.
I think he wants to win, man. I mean, I'm not in his brain, but the dude is not one. Like he won at Alabama. He is not one in the NFL. I think he wants a ring. If he thinks the Jets can do that for him, we'll see how much pull Aaron Rodgers has. We'll see how much pull this organization has after what happened last year. But I think
selfishly, even as a Jets fan, I'd really like to see him in Baltimore. That'd be so fun.
Stop. No, boo. From the Jets perspective, this is a great fit. Give me Derrick Henry. And again,
if he doesn't go to the Jets,
sure, send him to Baltimore.
If he says I'll play anywhere except the Jets.
Baltimore seems to be like the landing spot for almost every single older veteran running back over the last few years. Like they've got Le'Veon Bell,
like Lamar, like taking up so much responsibility. Like it's easier for a back to play there because
it is. I selfishly I would really love him on the Jets. And again, I cannot stress it enough. This is not a Dalvin Cook situation. Again, I don't know. Maybe Henry is going to hit the wall this year. I don't know, but he hasn't hit it yet. Dalvin Cook had hit that wall before the Jets signed him, and then we saw him really hit that wall after they signed him. Henry hasn't hit that wall yet. So bring me Derrick Henry, and yes, the Jets can afford it. For everyone on Twitter being like, oh, the Jets don't have enough cap space. They can create over $60 million in cap space. I think over 70 if they're to max restructure, which they're not going to do. But realistically, they'll probably have $45 million in cap space, something like that. They can absolutely afford to sign Derrick Henry. He's not going to cost that much money. Let's do this. Bring Derrick Henry to the Jets.
I like it.
Yep. That's my bold prediction.
Nice. I think it's time, about ready to call time on this show, Justin?
Yeah, I think so. I had to get that Derrick Henry rant off my chest. That was a couple of weeks ago, but I was still thinking about it. And I'm like, people are dumb. But anyway.
Justin, you can take us home.
As always, do we have anything else to say? No, we should be back next week. Thank you all for joining us as always. You can follow Mike on Twitter at by Mike Luciano. Follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Freed. Follow the Jet Press at the Jet Press. Download the Jet Press podcast wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube and TikTok. Subscribe, hit that notification bell. You guys know what to do. We stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all for listening to Jet Press Podcast. I've been Justin Freed. That has been Mike Luciano. We will see you guys next week.
See you folks next week.